Cowboy saw her denied at the shop, whispered, "Ride with me, I'll fill your table tonight." The shop was small, old, and quiet in the way places become when the day is almost over. One flickering light hung above the counter, buzzing softly like it was tired too. The shelves were not full, but they carried enough to keep people going. Bags of rice, bread wrapped in thin plastic, a few cans, cooking oil, soap. The smell inside was a mix of dust, dry food, and something warm from the heater behind the counter. She stood there holding a few items in her arms. Nothing extra. Just the basics. Bread. A small bag of rice. A carton of milk. Her hands were tight around them, like if she loosened her grip, everything might fall apart. She didn't look up much. Her eyes stayed on the counter, on the numbers the shopkeeper was tapping into his old calculator. The shopkeeper sighed. Not loudly, but enough to say he had done this before. He told her the total. She nodded and opened her purse. Inside was not much. Some loose coins. A few small bills that had been folded and unfolded many times. She counted slowly, carefully, as if counting too fast might change the result. Her fingers shook a little, but she kept going. One coin. Another. Then another. When she finished, she pushed the money forward. The shopkeeper counted it once, then again. He didn't look angry. He didn't look kind either. Just tired. "You're short," he said. The words were simple, but they landed heavy. She swallowed. "How much?" she asked quietly. He told her the amount. It wasn't a lot. Not enough to seem important to most people. But to her, it might as well have been miles away. She searched her purse again, even though she already knew there was nothing left. She checked the side pocket, then the small zipper inside. Nothing. Her shoulders dropped just a little, like the weight had finally caught up to her. "I can put one thing back," she said. "The milk, maybe." The shopkeeper shook his head. "Even then, it's not enough." For a moment, no one spoke. The sound of the light buzzing filled the space between them. She nodded slowly, trying to keep her face calm. She didn't want to beg. She didn't want pity. She just wanted to leave with something. Anything. But the shopkeeper was already reaching for the items, pulling them gently back across the counter. "I'm sorry," he said, though it sounded more like a habit than a feeling. She stepped back. Her face burned. Not from anger, but from the feeling that everyone could see her struggle written all over her. She turned toward the door, holding her purse close like it was the only thing she still owned. In the corner of the shop, a man had been standing quietly the whole time. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a worn jacket and boots covered in dust. A cowboy, or at least someone who lived like one. His hat sat low on his head, shadowing his eyes. He hadn't come in for much, just coffee and a few supplies, but he had noticed her the moment she walked in. He noticed how carefully she chose each item, how she checked prices twice. Boing. Whatever is it? How she stood like she was trying not to take up too much space. He noticed the way her jaw tightened when the shopkeeper spoke. The way she didn't argue. The way she accepted the answer, even though it hurt. Most people would have looked away, pretended not to see. It was easier that way. But he didn't. He knew that look. He had worn it once himself. Years ago, he had stood at a different counter in a different town counting coins just like that. Back then, someone had helped him without making a scene, without asking for anything in return. That memory had stayed with him longer than any hardship. As the woman reached for the door, something inside him shifted. He didn't rush, didn't shout. He just paid for his things and followed her outside. The air was cold. The sky was darkening, painted with fading orange near the horizon. The woman stopped just outside the shop, as if she needed a moment before going back to whatever waited for her. But she took a deep breath and rubbed her face with one hand, trying to steady herself. That's when she noticed him. She stiffened slightly, her guard rising. Life had taught her to be careful. "I don't want trouble," she said quickly, before he could speak. He lifted one hand gently. "No trouble," he said. His voice was low and calm. "I just wanted to talk." She looked at him for a second, then nodded. "Okay." They stood there, the shop's light spilling onto the ground between them. He could see her better now. She looked tired, but not weak. Strong in a quiet way. The kind of strength that comes from caring too much for too long. "I saw what happened," he said. "Inside." "It's fine," she replied, even though it clearly wasn't. "I'll figure it out." He believed her. People like her always did. But figuring it out shouldn't always mean suffering alone. He leaned in just slightly, lowering his voice so it stayed between them. no one else needed to hear. "Ride with me," he said. "I'll fill your table tonight." The words surprised her, not because of what they offered, but because of how they were said. No pride. No pressure. Just a simple promise. She looked at him, really looked this time. She searched his face for something wrong, for signs of bad intent. But all she saw was honesty and something else. Understanding. "I can't pay you back," she said. He nodded. "I know. I don't even know you." "I know that too." Her fear told her to step away. Trust was expensive when you had already lost so much. He didn't rush her. He didn't try to convince her. He just stood there, patient, letting her decide. Finally, she spoke. "Why would you do this?" He thought for a moment. Then he said, "Because once, someone did it for me." The wind moved around them, carrying the smell of dust and evening air. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, and another. "Okay," she said quietly. And with that single word, something small but powerful began, something neither of them fully understood yet, but both of them would remember for a long time. She stood still for a long moment after saying yes, as if the word itself needed time to settle. The cold air touched her face, but she barely noticed. What she noticed was her heart, beating faster than usual. It wasn't excitement. It was fear mixed with hope, and she wasn't sure which one was stronger. The cowboy didn't move closer. He didn't reach for her or guide her. He simply turned slightly and pointed toward his truck parked under a weak streetlight. It was old, scratched, and clearly well used, but it looked cared for. Nothing fancy. Nothing hidden. "That's mine," he said. "If you change your mind, that's okay." She looked at the truck, then back at the shop, then down the road that led toward her home. That road felt longer than ever. Heavy. Waiting. "I'll come," she said, her voice quiet but firm. He nodded once, respectful, like he had expected nothing more and nothing less. They walked to the truck in silence. The sound of their footsteps on gravel filled the space between them. He opened the passenger door and stepped back, giving her room. She noticed that. Small things mattered. As she climbed in, she hugged her purse to her chest. He waited until she was settled before closing the door gently. Then he walked around to the other side and got in. The engine started with a rough sound, like it had lived a long life. The heater clicked on, slowly pushing warm air into the cold cab. She let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. They drove for a few minutes without talking. The town lights faded behind them as the road stretched ahead, quiet and open. The sky was dark now, with stars beginning to show. The tires hummed against the pavement, steady and calm. She broke the silence first. "You don't have to do this," she said, still unsure. "I don't want to cause trouble." "You're not causing anything." Another pause. "My name is Sarah," she said. He glanced at her and gave a small nod. "I'm Jack." Saying their names made things feel more real, less like a moment and more like a memory in the making. After a while, Jack spoke again. "I'm not taking you anywhere strange," he said. "There's a place outside town. Comic. A market. Cheaper prices. I shop there sometimes." She nodded, though her shoulders were still tight. "Okay." As they drove, she noticed how careful he was. He didn't speed. He didn't rush. Everything about him felt measured, like he knew how fragile moments like this could be. The road narrowed, and the town disappeared completely. Fields stretched on both sides, dark shapes under the night sky. The silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It felt shared. Sarah stared out the window, watching the world pass by. Her thoughts drifted to her children. She pictured their faces, the way they tried not to complain when there was little to eat, the way they pretended to be full so she wouldn't feel bad. Her chest tightened. Jack noticed the change in her breathing. "You got kids?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then nodded. "2." He smiled slightly. "Good kids?" "The best," she said, and for the first time there was warmth in her voice. He didn't ask more right away. He let the road speak for a while. "I grew up moving around," he said eventually. "Didn't have much stability. Learned early how fast things can fall apart." She listened carefully, surprised by his openness. "There was a time," he continued, "when I couldn't afford a proper meal. I remember standing in a store just like that one, pretending I was deciding, when really I was counting coins over and over. A man paid for my food," he said. Didn't even tell me his name. Just said, "You'll do the same one day." Sarah swallowed. "Did you?" "I try." They pulled into a wide parking area lit by tall lights. A large market stood ahead, still busy despite the late hour. Trucks were parked everywhere. People moved in and out, carrying boxes and bags. Jack parked and turned off the engine. "You can stay here if you want," he said. "Or come in. Your choice." She shook her head. "I'll come." Inside, the market was brighter, louder, full of life. Shelves were stacked high, prices were lower than what she was used to seeing. Her eyes widened slightly as she realized how much more food she could get here. Jack handed her a cart. "Take what you need," he said. She pushed it slowly, unsure where to begin. At first, she chose only a few items, still thinking small. Bread, rice, beans. Jack watched quietly. After a moment, he added a bag of vegetables to the cart, then some fruit. "You'll need this too," he said simply. She looked at him. "Jack, this is too much." He met her eyes. "It's enough. Not rushed, not awkward. Just two people walking side by side." Sarah started to relax. She added things she hadn't bought in months. Cooking oil, eggs, even a small treat for the kids. At the checkout, she stepped back instinctively. Jack paid without showing off, without letting anyone notice. He didn't make it a moment. He just handled it, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Outside, they loaded the bags into the truck. The back filled quickly. She stared at it all, overwhelmed. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice breaking slightly. He shook his head. "You already did. You trusted me." The drive back felt different, lighter. The road seemed shorter. When they reached her street, she pointed at her house. Small, old, but clean. A place held together by care more than money. Jack parked and got out, helping her carry the bags to the door. A light flicked on inside, and she heard quiet footsteps. Her children peeked through the window, curious. She opened the door and turned back to Jack. "You don't have to come in. This is your moment." She nodded, understanding. "Thank you," she said again, this time without shame. He tipped his hat slightly. "Take care, Sarah." As she stepped inside and closed the door, Jack walked back to his truck. He didn't wait to be seen. He didn't wait for praise. He drove away under the stars, knowing that tonight one table would be full, and that was more than enough. The house felt different that night. Not louder, not brighter, but fuller in a way that couldn't be measured. The smell of fresh food spread slowly through the rooms as Sarah unpacked the bags on the small kitchen table. Her children sat quietly at first, watching with wide eyes, unsure if this was real or something that might disappear if they spoke too loudly. She placed the bread down, then the vegetables, then the fruit. One item after another. The table that had once looked empty now looked alive. Her hands moved carefully, almost respectfully, as if she were handling something fragile. Her daughter finally spoke. "Mama, did you buy all this?" Sarah nodded. She smiled, but her eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. "Yes," she said softly. "We're okay tonight." Her son reached for an apple, then stopped and looked at her, asking permission without words. She nodded again. He took a bite, slow and careful, like he wanted the moment to last. Sarah turned away for a second, pressing her fingers against the counter until her breathing steadied. She had learned how to be strong, but moments like this still cracked her open. Outside, Jack sat in his truck for a moment before driving off. He rested his hands on the steering wheel and looked up at the dark sky. He didn't smile, but something in his chest felt lighter. He didn't stay long. He never did. He pulled away quietly, letting the road take him back into his own life. The next morning, Sarah woke early. Habit, not choice. For a few seconds, she forgot everything. Then she smelled the food. Real food. Her heart jumped, and she sat up quickly as if afraid it might vanish. But it was still there. She moved through the morning with a new kind of energy. Packed some without counting every piece. She packed lunch for her children without fear. They laughed more than usual. Even their steps felt lighter as they left for school. When the door closed behind them, Sarah stood alone in the quiet house. She leaned against the wall and let herself breathe. Just breathe. Later that day, as she cleaned and organized, her thoughts kept returning to Jack. Not in a romantic way, not in a dreaming way, but in a wondering way. She wondered how many people he had helped like that. She wondered how many people had helped him once, long ago. She promised herself she wouldn't let this moment be wasted. Days passed. Sarah returned to work, taking extra shifts when she could. Life didn't suddenly become easy, but it became manageable. And sometimes manageable was everything. One afternoon at the same shop where everything had happened, Sarah stood behind another woman in line. The woman counted her money slowly, hands shaking in a familiar way. Sarah recognized the look immediately. When the shopkeeper spoke and shook his head, Sarah felt her chest tighten. Before the woman could step away, Sarah moved forward. "I've got it," she said quietly. The woman turned, surprised. "I can't." "It's okay," Sarah said, keeping her voice calm. "Really?" The woman hesitated, then nodded, eyes shining with something close to relief. "No speech. No explanation. Just action?" As the woman left, Sarah felt something settle inside her. She finally understood what Jack meant. Meanwhile, Jack continued his work on the road. Long days, early mornings, dust and wind and quiet nights. He didn't talk much about people. He didn't talk much at all. But sometimes, when he passed through towns, he noticed small changes. A shopkeeper being kinder than before. A stranger helping another without being asked. Little things. Easy to miss. But Jack noticed. One evening, weeks later, Jack found himself passing through the same town again. He hadn't planned it. Work just led him there. The sun was setting as he parked near the edge of town. He didn't intend to stop at Sarah's house. He didn't even know if she would want that. But as he drove past her street, he saw lights on. He saw children laughing in the yard. He slowed down just for a moment. Sarah noticed the truck from the corner of her eye. She froze. Her heart jumped. She knew that truck. Jack didn't stop. He didn't wave. He just drove past, steady and quiet. But Sarah smiled. That night, as she sat at the table with her children, she told them a story. Not the full one, just enough. "Sometimes," she said, "people help us when we need it most. And sometimes we become those people for someone else." Her children listened carefully, like the words mattered, and they did. Far down the road, Jack drove on under the stars. He didn't know what the future held for Sarah or her children. He didn't need to. He knew one thing for sure. Kindness didn't end when a moment passed. The days slowly turned into weeks, and life kept moving forward. It did not suddenly become perfect, but it became steadier. Sarah learned to wake up each morning without the heavy fear sitting on her chest. The house still had problems. Bills still came. Work was still tiring. But now there was food in the kitchen, and that changed everything. Simple plans, but plans nonetheless. She made lists not just of what was missing, but of what was possible. She budgeted carefully, stretching every bit, remembering how close she had once been to losing control. The memory of that evening at the shop stayed with her. Not as pain, but as a reminder. Every evening she set the table neatly, even if the meal was simple. She wanted her children to feel that their home was a place of care, not struggle. They noticed. They started helping more. Cleaning up, laughing, talking about school without fear of upsetting her. One afternoon, Sarah received extra hours at work. It wasn't much, but it mattered. She accepted without hesitation. When she came home that night, tired but proud, she cooked dinner with a quiet smile on her face. She was earning again. Standing again. As she stirred the pot, her mind went back to Jack. She wondered where he was now. On another road, perhaps? In another town? Helping someone else without them ever knowing his story. She hoped he was okay. That was all. A few days later, Sarah decided to visit the market again, this time on her own. She wanted to prove something to herself. She walked through the aisles slowly, comparing prices, choosing carefully. When she reached the checkout, she paid with money she had earned herself. As she stepped outside with her bags, she felt something close to pride. Not loud pride, quiet pride. The kind that sits deep and steady. At home, she placed the groceries on the table and paused. The table. The same table that once held almost nothing. She ran her hand over its surface and smiled softly. I would seen fear, tears, and now hope. That evening, she invited her children to sit with her. "We're going to keep moving forward," she told them, together. They nodded, trusting her completely. Meanwhile, on a dusty road far away, Jack was finishing a long day of work. His hands were rough, his back tired, but his mind was calm. He wasn't thinking about hero moments or big changes. He never did, he believed. Life was made of small actions done at the right time. That night, he stopped at a quiet roadside place to eat. As he sat there, he noticed an elderly man struggling to pay. Without thinking too much, Jack covered the cost. The man thanked him again and again, but Jack only nodded. "Just passing it along," he said. The words felt familiar now. Back in town, Sarah continued her routine. One morning, her daughter came home excited. "Mama," she said, "we're having a food drive at school." "Can we help?" Sarah felt her throat tighten. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "We can." They gathered what they could spare. Not much, but enough. As Sarah placed the items into the box, she felt the circle closing gently, not ending, but continuing. On another evening, Sarah passed the same shop where everything had once gone wrong. She stepped inside, not as someone desperate, but as a customer. The shopkeeper looked up and recognized her. He nodded politely. She bought what she needed and left without hesitation. Outside, she paused for a moment, breathing in the cool air. She realized something important. She was no longer afraid of this place. Weeks later, one quiet afternoon, Sarah heard a familiar engine outside. She looked through the window and saw Jack's truck parked across the street. Her heart skipped, but she stayed calm. He wasn't here to rescue. He never was. He was just passing through. Jack stepped out, adjusting his hat. He didn't come to the door right away. He waited, unsure. Sarah opened the door herself. They stood there for a second, just looking at each other. "You look well," Jack said. "So do you," she replied. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. She told him she was working more. He told her he was still on the road. Simple updates. Honest and calm. "I wanted you to know," Sarah said. "I've been helping others when I can." Jack smiled, just a little. "That's good," he said. Her children watched from inside, curious but respectful. Jack tipped his hat to them. "I won't stay long," he said. "I know," Sarah replied. Before he left, she spoke again. "Thank you," she said. "Not just for the food. For reminding me who I am." "You already knew," he said. "You just needed a moment." He got back into his truck and drove away, leaving no noise behind him. Sarah watched until he disappeared down the road. That evening, she set the table once more. The same table, filled again. Not just with food, but with something stronger, stability, hope. Time moved forward the way it always does, quietly, without asking permission. Seasons shifted, days grew longer, then shorter again. Life did not stop testing Sarah, but she no longer felt like she was standing alone in the middle of every storm. Her children grew stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. They learned the value of sharing, of noticing others, of understanding that everyone carries something unseen. Sarah saw it in the way her son offered his seat to an older neighbor, and in how her daughter saved small things to give away later. These were lessons no book could teach. They were learned at the table. That table became the heart of their home. Every meal, no matter how simple, was eaten together. Phones stayed away. Stories were shared. Some nights they laughed. Other nights they spoke quietly. But they were present, and that mattered more than anything else. Sarah continued working hard. She took classes when she could, learning new skills. It was tiring, but it was hopeful work. Each small step forward felt like proof that her life was not defined by one bad moment at a shop counter. Sometimes when money was still tight, fear would try to creep back in. But she knew how to face it now. She reminded herself of where she had been and how far she had come, and she remembered Jack, not every day, not in a way that held her back, but in a way that guided her forward. He had shown her that help could be given without strings, without pride, without noise. That lesson stayed with her. Jack, meanwhile, continued his quiet life on the road. He worked, rested, moved on. Towns blurred together after a while, but faces stayed with him. Not names or details, just moments. A smile. A relieved breath. A thank you that didn't need to be spoken. He never told his story. He didn't think it was special. He believed most people would do the same thing if they remembered what it felt like to be hungry, scared, or unseen. One evening in a town far from Sarah's, Jack sat alone near a small fire after a long day. The sky was clear, filled with stars. He thought about how strange life was, how one small choice could move through so many lives without ever being noticed. He smiled softly and added another piece of wood to the fire. Back home, Sarah stood in her kitchen one quiet night, washing dishes while her children slept. The house was peaceful, safe. She looked around and felt something deep and steady settle inside her. Gratitude. Not the kind that fades quickly, but the kind that changes how you see the world. The next morning she walked past the shop again. She saw someone standing outside, looking lost. Without thinking, she slowed her steps. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. The person nodded, surprised, then hesitated. "I think so," they said. "Just a rough day." Sarah smiled. "I understand." She didn't need to. Sometimes being seen was enough. Years later, her children would remember these moments more than the hard ones. They would remember the warmth of their home, the feeling of enough, and the quiet strength of their mother. They would remember that kindness was not loud or proud. It was steady and real. One evening, long after the past had softened its edges, Sarah set the table once again. Plates, bread, simple food, simple joy. She paused, her hand resting on the table, and whispered a quiet promise to herself. She would always make room. For others. For hope. Or for kindness. Far down a long road, Jack drove beneath a wide sky, the sound of tires humming softly. He didn't know where he would end up next. He didn't need to. He trusted the road. Somewhere a table was full, and that was enough.